Get your black ass out of this seat, this isn't economy cosplay. The words tore through the quiet cabin like a crack of thunder. 32,000 feet above the Pacific, the air in first class stopped moving. The woman who said it, blonde bun, navy uniform, the confidence of someone who'd never been challenged, didn't even blink. Her hand was already on his shoulder. Cameras weren't rolling yet. They would be soon. Before we go deeper, let me ask you something. Have you ever been told you did not belong in a space you paid for, in a room you built, in a system that profits from your silence? Stay with me, because in less than 30 minutes, this man will remind an entire airline who really controls the sky. Darius Cole sat still, tailored red suit pressed sharp against the gray leather. He had not raised his voice. He had not moved. Around him, a dozen passengers watched, pretending not to. One man smirked behind his tablet. Another whispered, "Must have snuck in." The aisle light buzzed faintly, like even it was nervous. The flight attendant's badge read Nicole Harris. Her voice carried the kind of authority that comes from repetition, not truth. "This seat is assigned to a platinum member," she snapped. Darius met her gaze. It was, yes. "Not anymore," she said, reaching for his ticket stub. He held it just long enough for the row to notice the trembling in her hand, not fear, but certainty. The certainty that she could rewrite his reality because everyone else would believe her. Across the aisle, a man in a gray sport coat leaned toward his wife. "He doesn't look like a first-class passenger." The wife didn't respond. She looked down, embarrassed, as if silence could hide complicity. Darius exhaled slowly. He'd been here before, not this cabin, but this theater. The choreography never changed. Suspicion, humiliation, then justification. What changed was how he answered. Nicole leaned in closer. "Sir, I'm going to ask you one more time to move before I call security." The man beside her, Brian Foster, younger, eager, added, "We've had scams before. People printing fake boarding passes. Happens all the time." Darius looked up at him, calm as marble. "Then I suggest you check your system before you embarrass your company." That line hung in the air. From the back, a phone camera lifted slightly, lens blinking red. Someone whispered, "Oh my God, is this happening?" Nicole stepped forward, snatched the ticket, and tore it clean in half. "You can explain it to airport police." Darius didn't blink. His hand went to his phone. One call, no drama. "Rachel," he said, voice even, "log this. Flight 612, Gate B14, seat reassignment. Activate audit protocol." Passengers glanced at one another. Nicole frowned. "Who the hell are you?" He looked up slowly, eyes cold, deliberate. "The man whose budget keeps this plane in the air." The silence that followed did not last. It never does. Within seconds, the entire front cabin seemed to inhale as one. Leather seats creaked, glasses trembled on their stems, and whispers began to move like current through water. Everyone had seen it. A black man in a red suit sitting exactly where he paid to be, and a white uniform deciding that was a mistake. Nicole Harris straightened, smoothing her skirt as if her own hands could erase what had just happened. "Sir, we can resolve this quietly if you cooperate," she said, the edge still sharp in her voice. Darius Cole did not answer right away. He set his phone on the armrest, the screen glowing faintly, and adjusted his tie with surgical calm. "Quiet," he repeated softly, "is a privilege you already lost." From 2 rows back, an older man cleared his throat. "Maybe he should just move. Why make it worse?" A younger passenger beside him replied, "Worse for who?" The tension rippled through the aisles. No one looked directly at Darius, but every pair of eyes was aware of him. The captain's voice crackled through the intercom, low and routine. "Cabin crew, prepare for final boarding." Nicole snapped to attention, nodded to Brian Foster, and lowered her tone. "Do not escalate this. Call ground security if he refuses." Brian hesitated. What if he is right? What if it is a system error? She shot him a look that could slice through steel. "Do I look like I care about system errors? Follow procedure." At the very back, a trainee flight attendant named Mia watched the exchange from the galley. Her hands tightened around a tray of water glasses. Something about it felt wrong, not just rude wrong. She had seen the scan herself. The boarding pass had glowed green, valid, authentic. She whispered to herself, "I saw it." It cleared. Meanwhile, Darius opened his briefcase, not rushing, not defensive. Inside, a tablet, a leather folio, a black fountain pen. He pulled up a document with quiet precision. His reflection glimmered faintly on the dark screen. "Mr. Cole," Nicole said louder now, "if you will not comply, you will be escorted off this aircraft. You are holding up first-class boarding." He turned his head, meeting her eyes again. "You mean I am holding up your comfort zone?" Ugh. That line made two passengers glance up from their phones. One woman whispered, "Did you hear that?" Another nodded slowly. Darius's calm was unnerving, a mirror that forced everyone to see themselves. It was the same look he had worn years ago in a downtown hotel when a clerk called him sir, but refused to hand him the key. He had learned back then that dignity, when weaponized, could be louder than rage. Brian returned with a folded paper, printed fresh from the gate. "Nicole, the manifest still shows Cole, Darius, seat 2 Alpha." She frowned. "That cannot be right. Recheck the platinum list." Brian tapped the paper again. "I just did." Passengers began recording now, phones tilted at discrete angles. The red light of one camera blinked over the seat back like a heartbeat. Nicole turned, her voice rising. "You people think filming helps? You have no idea what it is like dealing with imposters every week." Darius lifted his gaze. "Imposters?" His tone was not loud, but it carried. "The only thing I am pretending to be right now is patient." Gasps and murmurs followed. Even Brian looked away. Nicole pressed a button on her radio. "Captain, we have a situation in first class." The reply came filtered through static. "Handle it. Do not delay takeoff." A uniformed security officer appeared at the cabin entrance, tall, stern, the kind of authority that travels with the badge, not the brain. "Problem here?" he asked. Nicole gestured toward Darius. "This passenger is refusing to leave a reassigned seat." Darius raised one eyebrow. "Reassigned by who?" "By me," she said firmly. The officer turned to Darius. "Sir, if you could step into the jet bridge, we can sort this out." Darius looked up at him, expression unreadable. "If I step off this plane, you will not have a flight to sort out." The officer blinked, uncertain if he had heard a threat or a fact. Mia finally set down her tray and walked forward a few rows. Her voice trembled, but she spoke clearly. "Captain, that ticket was valid. I saw it. He belongs in 2 Alpha." Nicole spun toward her. "Mia, return to the galley. Now." "I will not," she said, her voice rising slightly. "You tore his ticket without authorization. That is against procedure." For the first time, Nicole's mask slipped. "You have no idea how this works," she hissed. Mia replied, "Maybe not, but I know what right looks like." The cabin had shifted. People were no longer pretending not to watch. A middle-aged woman in the second row said quietly, "This is not about a seat." A man across the aisle whispered, "It never is." Darius finally stood, smooth and deliberate, gathering his things as if he were preparing to testify, not surrender. His voice cut through the low hum of the cabin. "You called ground security for a valid passenger. You ripped official property. You are about to make a federal mistake." Nicole stepped back, color draining from her face. "Excuse me?" He held up his phone, the screen now recording. "This call is being logged through Horizon Air Corporate Compliance. Every word, every action." Brian's mouth opened, but no sound came. Mia whispered. "He said Horizon Corporate." Darius continued, voice steady as glass. "You will keep your hands off me. You will stand back, and in less than 20 minutes, you will understand exactly who paid for the wings holding this aircraft in the air." No one moved. The hum of the engines grew louder, but the people inside were still. For the first time, the power in the cabin had shifted not by volume, not by threat, but by truth quietly taking its place. For a long moment, no one spoke. The air itself seemed to hesitate, caught between fear and revelation. Darius Cole remained standing, tall and composed, as if gravity had chosen him as its center. The passengers were no longer an audience, they were witnesses, and they knew it. The security officer shifted his weight uneasily. "Sir, let us take this outside and clarify everything." Darius shook his head once. "Everything that needs clarification will happen here." His tone was low but absolute, the kind of calm that silences entire rooms. Nicole Harris folded her arms, forcing a smirk that failed to reach her eyes. "You really think you can intimidate us with that corporate nonsense?" He turned toward her, slow, deliberate. "No," he said. "I do not need to intimidate you. The facts will do that for me." Behind him, Mia stood frozen, her face pale but steady. The rest of the crew avoided her gaze, pretending to check seat belts that were already buckled. Somewhere near the front, a passenger whispered, "He sounds like someone who knows exactly what he is doing." Another answered, "Maybe he does." The intercom crackled again. "Cabin crew, what is the delay?" The captain's voice carried the edge of authority, trying to mask irritation. Nicole lifted her radio, her words tight and clipped. "Captain, we have a passenger claiming to be with corporate. He is refusing to leave first class." The response came sharp. "If he is not authorized, remove him." At that, Darius smiled, small, patient, unsettling. "You are very confident in your chain of command," he said softly, "but you have not checked who signs it." He tapped the side of his phone twice. On the other end, a woman's voice came through the speaker, crisp and calm. "Mr. Cole, this is Rachel. Horizon Compliance Team is online and monitoring. I have cross-referenced your boarding record and security feed. The footage is clear." Nicole blinked. "What footage?" Rachel's voice continued, amplified enough for the nearby passengers to hear. "Every first-class cabin has an internal audit camera. You tore the ticket on video, Miss Harris. The data is already secured." The room seemed to tilt. Even the officer stepped back slightly. "Rachel," Darius said, "notify the board that I will be grounded until this is resolved. Put the fleet hold on standby." Her reply came without hesitation. "Confirmed, sir. Protocol 7 is prepped. Estimated impact, $100 million in frozen assets until release." Nicole's voice cracked. "You cannot do that. You are bluffing." Darius looked at her calmly. "Do I sound like someone who bluffs?" For a moment, only the hum of the engines answered. Then Brian Foster finally spoke, his tone breaking through the tension. "Wait, you are saying you can stop operations? You can freeze budgets?" Darius's eyes never left Nicole. "I can, and I will, if necessary. But what matters is why I have to." Mia took a tentative step forward. "Sir, do you want me to get the captain?" "No," Darius said. "Let him come to me. This lesson is for everyone in this cabin." A murmur moved through the passengers like wind through dry leaves. Phones were no longer subtle, they were raised high, capturing every breath. Somewhere near the back, a woman whispered, "He owns them." The phrase spread like wildfire. Nicole's voice trembled now, stripped of authority. "You cannot speak to me like that. I have worked for this airline for 15 years. "And in those 15 years," Darius said, "how many passengers have you humiliated for looking like me?" Her mouth opened, then closed. She could not answer. Mia broke the silence again. "I can confirm his name was on the manifest. It was valid. She deleted it manually after boarding." Nicole spun around. "You cannot prove that." Rachel's voice, still calm through the phone, interrupted. "Actually, she can. The system log records every change. Your terminal ID, time-stamped 1814 hours. That file is live." The color drained from Nicole's face completely. She turned to the security officer for help, but he looked away. "I think this is above my authority," he muttered. Darius took a slow breath and spoke to the entire cabin. "When people talk about equality, they imagine moments like this do not happen anymore. They happen every day. The only difference is whether the person being targeted has the power to respond." He looked around at the silent passengers, at the cameras still filming. "I am not raising my voice. I am not here to threaten anyone. I am here to remind you that the ground you stand on and the air you fly through exist because people like me built it, invested in it, and sustained it." The weight of his words pressed into every seat. Even the hum of the cabin changed, as though the aircraft itself understood. Then came the voice from the cockpit again, this time uncertain. "This is Captain Reynolds. Mr. Cole, this is a misunderstanding. Please allow us to correct it quietly." Darius's reply was steady. "It stopped being quiet when your staff decided a man in a red suit could not possibly belong here." The captain hesitated. "Sir, may I speak with you privately?" "No," Darius said. "You may stay right where you are and listen, because right now, the world is listening with you." Rachel's voice returned once more, final and controlled. "Sir, the board has been notified. Live monitoring confirmed. Do you wish to execute the temporary freeze?" Darius's answer was a whisper that carried like thunder. "Do it." A few passengers gasped. Nicole's knees nearly buckled. Rachel confirmed, "Don't. All budget activity suspended pending investigation. Estimated cost to operations, $100 million. The cabin fell completely silent. No engine hum, No whisper, no shuffle of movement. Only the reality that the man they had tried to remove had just grounded an empire with a single word. Darius Cole sat back down in seat 2 Alpha, folded his hands, and looked straight ahead. "Now," he said softly, "let us have a safe flight." The announcement had not come over the intercom, yet everyone felt it. The air changed. The quiet hum of engines no longer sounded steady. It pulsed like a heartbeat under pressure. Darius Cole's single word had rippled through an invisible network of servers, executives, and investors. Within minutes, a billion-dollar airline began to tremble from the inside. But inside the first-class cabin, it was dead silent. Nicole Harris stood frozen beside the aisle, her hands still gripping the torn boarding pass. Her lips moved, but no sound came out. Brian Foster stared at her like a man watching his own career unravel in real time. Mia Lang, the trainee, stood halfway between fear and awe, her gaze fixed on Darius as if witnessing a story she would one day tell her grandchildren. Darius did not look triumphant. He looked calm, too calm for what he had just done. He leaned back slightly, resting his hands together, and said quietly, "The investigation will begin before we land. You should start thinking about what you are going to tell them." Nicole blinked hard, shaking her head. You cannot just threaten us like this." "I have not threatened anyone," Darius replied. "I have simply pulled the emergency brake on a system that forgot how to treat people like humans." The captain's voice cut through the silence again, this time shaky. "Mr. Cole, this is Captain Reynolds. We have received a notification from corporate. They are requesting immediate communication. May I ask what exactly is happening?" Darius pressed the button on his seat armrest. "Captain, I recommend you stay seated and follow the next instructions from your operations director. Tell her you are standing by for compliance review." There was a long pause. "Understood," the captain finally said. The cabin felt like a courtroom now. The lights overhead glowed too white, too clean. Every passenger's expression hovered between fascination and guilt. A middle-aged woman in a navy coat finally whispered, "I feel sick." A man across from her muttered, "You should. We all should." Nicole took a step forward, desperate to reclaim a sliver of authority. "Sir, if you truly are who you say you are, then you should understand protocol. We cannot delay departure because of personal issues." Darius turned his head toward her. His eyes were calm but unyielding. "You are right. Protocol exists to protect structure, not ego. And the protocol you violated is called respect." Brian lowered his head. "Sir, I did not mean any harm. I just followed her lead." Darius nodded once. "That is how it always happens. One person acts out prejudice, and everyone else calls it procedure." He stood again, slow and deliberate. His voice was steady but carried the weight of something ancient, the kind of quiet power that outlives noise. "I built my career in rooms that looked just like this," he said. Different ceilings, same eyes, the same disbelief that a black man could own what they use. A faint memory crossed his mind, a hotel lobby in Dallas 15 years ago. He was 30 and still learning how to dress success. A clerk told him his card was declined before even swiping it. He remembered the sting, the laughter from another guest, the security guard who approached before he even spoke. That night he decided he would never explain his worth again. Back in the present, his eyes sharpened. "You have to understand something," he said. "When I froze your budget, I did not do it to humiliate you. I did it to remind you that people are not assets to be rearranged for your comfort. You cannot measure humanity in seat assignments." Nicole's jaw tightened. "So what happens now? Are we supposed to bow?" Darius shook his head. "No, you are supposed to learn." Rachel's voice returned over the phone, calm and clinical. "Mr. Cole, corporate legal is requesting confirmation of the incident details. They have received both the video feed and passenger statements. The ethics board will meet within the hour." "Thank you, Rachel," Darius said. "Continue logging." From the back, a passenger called out, "Sir, do you really own this airline?" Darius turned slightly toward him. "Part of it. Enough to make decisions when fairness stops." The answer struck the cabin like a confession. No one spoke. No one dared move. Even the security officer, still standing at the entryway, seemed to shrink in size. Mia finally broke the silence. "Mr. Cole, I am sorry. I should have spoken up sooner." He looked at her and nodded. "You did what many do not. You told the truth when it mattered." Her eyes glistened. "I just did not want to lose my job." He offered a faint, almost fatherly smile. You did not lose it. You saved it. Nicole sank into the nearest empty seat, her posture collapsing under the weight of disbelief. I was just doing my job, she whispered. No, Darius said. You were doing what you were taught to see authority only in one shade, and doubt everything else. Outside the window, the tarmac lights flickered. Ground crews were already gathering near the aircraft, cell phones pressed to their ears, waiting for the next instruction. The world was moving, reacting, realigning, all because of what had happened in Seat 2 Alpha. Brian finally found his voice again. What will happen to us? That, Darius said, depends on what you do with this moment. Either you treat it like a scandal or like a lesson. He turned to face the passengers one last time. What you witnessed today is not rare. It just happened to someone who could respond. Remember that the next time you see it happened to someone who cannot. Then he sat back down, eyes forward, hands folded. The captain's voice returned, subdued. Ladies and gentlemen, there will be a brief delay as we coordinate with ground operations. Thank you for your patience. No one complained. No one dared. As the engines idled and the minutes stretched, the passengers in first class realized they were living inside a moment that would outlast them. They had boarded a routine flight and stepped into history. The plane did not move. Outside, rain began to slide across the oval windows, streaking the glass like ink running from a confession. Inside, the tension had thickened into something physical, almost visible, a quiet storm of judgment, regret, and disbelief. Darius Cole sat still in Seat 2 Alpha, the weight of silence pressing around him. His calm was no longer just composure, it was authority, the kind that did not need volume or violence to be felt. He could hear the soft hum of the ventilation system, the faint clicking of nervous fingers on phones, and the whisper of a uniform brushing against leather as Nicole Harris shifted uncomfortably beside the aisle. She had spent 15 years believing that control meant order, that confidence could replace compassion. But now, staring at the man she had humiliated, she saw something worse than anger, grace. And grace and power terrified her more than rage ever could. From the cockpit, Captain Reynolds's voice came again, this time quieter, human. Mr. Cole, corporate has confirmed your status. We have received clearance to proceed pending your approval. I repeat, pending your approval. Every passenger heard it. The words sounded surreal, almost cinematic. The captain of a major airline asking permission from the man they had tried to remove. Darius pressed the intercom button on his armrest. Captain Reynolds, I am not holding your flight hostage. I am holding your system accountable. You may proceed once you confirm that every report, every recording, and every witness statement from this incident has been logged. The pause that followed was long enough for everyone to count their own pulse. Then the captain replied, voice low but steady. Understood, sir. Compliance confirms documentation in progress. Nicole whispered to herself. Compliance? They are actually treating him like... Brian cut her off with a glance. He is that important, Nicole. You tore the ticket of a man who owns the sky you fly through. Mia Lang, still standing near the galley, tried to steady her breathing. Her reflection flickered faintly in the mirrored cabinet behind her. For the first time since she joined the airline, she felt like her uniform meant something beyond protocol. She stepped forward again. Mr. Cole, she said softly, thank you for not yelling. Most people would have. Darius turned toward her, his eyes warm for the first time that day. When you have been yelled at your entire life, he said, you learn the value of silence. His words sank into the room like rain into soil. The passengers were no longer just observers. They were participants in a reckoning. An older man across the aisle cleared his throat. I will admit, sir, I doubted you at first. I thought maybe you were trying to stir trouble. Darius nodded once. That is what prejudice does. It makes good people side with wrong actions because it feels familiar. The man looked down. I am sorry. Do not apologize to me, Darius said. Just remember me the next time you see someone treated like this and does not have a board of directors behind them. The cabin door opened briefly, and a ground operations supervisor stepped in. His name tag read, J. Carter. He looked nervous. Mr. Cole, corporate has requested that I deliver this personally. He handed over a sleek black envelope stamped with the Horizon emblem. Darius opened it slowly. Inside was a formal letter printed in precise corporate language acknowledgement of misconduct, immediate suspension of the staff involved, and a public apology to follow upon landing. He folded the letter once and slid it into the seat pocket in front of him. "You can tell them," he said, "that this is not about my comfort. It is about what they are willing to tolerate in silence." "Yes, sir," the supervisor replied quietly before retreating. Nicole's face was pale. They suspended us already?" Darius looked at her. "Not yet. They are giving you a chance to speak before they decide. Use it." She swallowed hard. "Speak to who?" "To me," he said. Her voice trembled. "I thought you were lying. I thought you were just another man trying to sneak into what was not his." Darius tilted his head slightly. "And why did you think that?" "Because," she hesitated, then exhaled, "because it has happened before." He studied her expression. "You are right. It has happened before to me for 20 years. The only difference is that I decided to stop accepting it." He did not smile. He did not soften. He simply existed in a way that demanded truth. Across the aisle, a young woman lifted her phone, still recording but now with tears in her eyes. "This is what justice looks like," she whispered to no one in particular. Mia turned toward Nicole, her voice gentle but steady. "You can fix this, you know. Maybe not today, but you can start by telling the truth." Nicole looked down at her hands, the same hands that had torn his ticket, the same hands that had pointed to the exit. She realized that those hands had written her entire life story: control, command, compliance. But they had never once written compassion. "I was wrong," she said quietly. The words seemed to echo. Darius did not react right away. He just nodded once, then said, "That is the first honest thing you have said today. Remember how it feels." He leaned back again, closing his eyes for a brief moment. When he spoke, his voice carried both exhaustion and strength. "I have spent my life building systems meant to run smoothly, but no system can fix what people refuse to face. Until we learn to see each other without bias, we will keep repeating this same flight, same route, same altitude, same blindness." Outside, lightning flashed across the horizon, illuminating the wings in a silver glow. Inside, the silence was heavy but healing. Captain Reynolds spoke once more, his voice softer than before. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have been cleared for departure. Please remain seated." The engines roared back to life. As the plane began to taxi, Darius looked out the window. Raindrops streaked sideways against the glass, like timelines bending, the old world falling away, the new one just taking off. He whispered, barely audible, "Maybe this time, we fly differently." Oh, and for the first time since the incident began, the passengers of Flight 612 exhaled not in relief, but in understanding. The aircraft lifted from the runway with a low, thunderous growl. Clouds swallowed the wings as the city below dissolved into mist and memory. Inside the first-class cabin, there was no applause, no chatter, no clinking of glasses, only the hum of the engines and the sound of quiet reckoning. Darius Cole leaned his head against the seat, eyes open but distant. His reflection stared back at him in the window, composed, unreadable, a man who had learned how to carry silence like armor. He did not need to win. He only needed the truth to stay standing long enough to be seen. Behind him, the passengers sat still, suspended between guilt and awe. They were traveling at 35,000 feet, but it felt as if the ground had risen to meet them. For the first time, the weight of justice did not feel abstract. It had a name, a face, and a seat assignment. 2 Alpha. Nicole Harris remained in the jump seat near the galley, her hands folded, her mind running faster than the plane. Every word she had said replayed in her head, every assumption, every glance. She had been trained to manage chaos, but no one had ever prepared her for humility. Brian Foster sat beside her, silent. He stared down at his tablet screen, which still displayed the passenger manifest. The name Cole, Darius, Executive Oversight, glowed at the top, undeniable and permanent. He whispered, "We could have just scanned again." Nicole's voice cracked. "We could have just believed him." In the row behind Darius, an elderly black woman wearing a pearl gray scarf reached for her phone. Her fingers trembled slightly as she typed a message to her granddaughter. The text read, "He stayed calm, and they listened. Maybe things really can change." She hesitated before hitting send, as if afraid hope might not survive the altitude. A flight attendant from economy class approached cautiously, offering a glass of water. "Mr. Cole," she said softly, "on behalf of some of us, I want to say thank you." He turned toward her, his voice even. "For what? For not walking away? For making them see it?" Darius nodded once. "The hardest part about change," he said, "is that it always embarrasses someone first." The woman smiled faintly, then walked back down the aisle. The captain's voice returned over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are now at cruising altitude. Please feel free to move about the cabin." His tone was different, slower, careful, as if even he understood that words now carried weight. Darius opened his briefcase again, pulling out a sleek black folder embossed with the Horizon insignia. Inside were quarterly reports, meeting notes, and signatures of the same executives who would soon call him for answers. He flipped through the pages slowly, methodically, until he found what he was looking for, a line item on the last page titled Cultural Compliance and Employee Conduct. He stared at it for a long moment. Then he took out his pen and wrote beneath it in clean, deliberate letters, "Effective immediately reviewed in person." Oh, Mia Lang passed by his seat, gathering discarded napkins from the aisles. She stopped for a moment and said, "Mr. Cole, I have never seen anyone handle something like that without yelling." He smiled faintly. "I used to, but shouting only makes people defend their blindness." Mia hesitated. "Do you think they will fire her?" Darius looked toward Nicole, who sat stiffly near the bulkhead. "I think they will investigate her. What happens next depends on whether she tells the truth." For several minutes, no one spoke. The cabin had the heavy stillness of a church after prayer. The clouds outside thinned, revealing a stretch of deep blue sky, endless, open, unjudging. Then, from somewhere near the front, a voice spoke softly. "Mr. Cole?" It was Nicole. She had risen from her seat, every movement heavy with regret. Her posture was different now, no longer rigid authority, but something smaller, more fragile. "I want to apologize again," she said. "Not because corporate told me to, but because I finally understand what I did." Darius did not turn around immediately. He let her words hang there, like air waiting for release. "You understand what part?" he asked. "I saw your skin first," she said quietly. "Then your ticket, then your calm. But I never saw your right to be here. That is what I have been doing my whole life, deciding who belongs where." Her honesty silenced the room again. Even the hum of the cabin seemed to soften. Darius faced her fully now. "Acknowledging bias is not redemption," he said, "but it is the first door you have to open." Nicole nodded slowly, her voice trembling. "Then I hope I can walk through it." Mia, standing nearby, whispered under her breath, "This is what leadership looks like." For the next few minutes, nothing else was said. The passengers began to relax slightly, though none of them reached for their champagne or their headphones. They simply sat, as if still learning how to share space with truth. From the cockpit, Rachel's voice came through again, patched through the flight's internal system. "Mr. Cole, the Compliance Board has confirmed receipt of your statement. The review process is underway. They have requested you attend the hearing once you land." "Tell them I will," Darius replied calmly. "And tell them this. If we want to lead an airline that touches every part of the world, we need to start acting like the world deserves our respect." "Yes, sir," Rachel said. The line clicked off. Nicole sat back down, silent. Her eyes glistened, not from fear of losing her job, but from the sudden understanding of how small that fear was compared to what she had done. The older woman with the gray scarf leaned toward Darius from behind his seat. "Baby," she said softly, "I prayed for men like you to exist. Men who could make them see without ever raising their hand." He smiled gently, eyes still on the horizon outside the window. "My mother used to say the same thing." She nodded. "Then she raised you right." At 35,000 feet, surrounded by strangers, Darius Cole finally allowed himself to breathe. The engines roared steady beneath his feet, but for the first time, they did not sound like machines. They sounded like the rhythm of a world learning how to move forward, one truth, one flight, one reckoning at a time. The clouds below them began to thin, revealing a vast ocean of blue and gold light. The sun had broken through the storm. Its rays spilled into the cabin, washing over rows of polished seats, champagne glasses, and faces still frozen between shame and awakening. Darius Cole sat upright, his gaze steady on the light outside. To everyone else, it was just sunlight through the window. To him, it looked like a verdict. For 20 years, he had moved through airports and boardrooms built with his name hidden in the fine print. Today, that anonymity had ended. Behind him, Nicole Harris adjusted her uniform collar. She had taken off the blazer that once made her feel invincible. The navy fabric now lay folded neatly on her lap, heavy with consequence. She kept glancing toward Darius, her mind rehearsing words she had never needed before. Humility, accountability, apology. Each one tasted foreign, fragile. Brian Foster still sat near the galley, scrolling through his tablet. He was trying to read the company messages that had begun flooding the crew portal. Each one came with a new timestamp, each colder than the last. Incident logged. Pending review. Compliance confirmed. Do not engage further without authorization. Embassy, he whispered. We are already in the report. Nicole closed her eyes. I know. From the far end of the cabin, Mia Lang watched in silence. Her heart had not stopped racing since the moment she spoke up. She was just a trainee, barely 6 months into her contract. And yet, her words, simple, trembling words, had stopped a system in motion. She wondered if she would still have a job when they landed. But somewhere deep down, she knew she would not trade what she did for anything. Darius turned slightly in his seat and looked toward her. Mia, he said, his voice low, but it carried through the cabin. Yes, sir? Do not lose that instinct, he said. It is what the world tries hardest to erase. She nodded, unsure whether to smile or cry. The captain's voice broke the quiet again. Ladies and gentlemen, we will be beginning our meal service shortly. We expect smooth skies ahead. But even his tone sounded hollow, like he was performing a routine that no longer made sense. As the flight attendants from economy section entered the cabin, they hesitated. They had all heard the news through the intercom network. Their eyes darted from Darius to Nicole and back again, unsure whom to serve first. Darius saved them the trouble. He raised a hand slightly and said, "Serve everyone else first." His tone was not bitter, it was measured. A small gesture of power turned back into grace. The attendants nodded quickly and began to move down the aisle. Silver trays clinked softly, glasses filled, napkins unfolded. But the air still carried weight. Every motion felt like penance. An hour passed. The engines hummed steady, but minds did not rest. A man across the aisle, wearing a gray business suit, finally spoke. Mr. Cole, he said carefully, if you do not mind me asking, what does freezing a $100 million budget actually mean? Darius turned to face him. It means every plane, every department, every paycheck connected to that number stops moving until the truth is examined. It means a company that thought it could fly without ethics has to land and look at itself. The man nodded slowly, his throat dry. That is a heavy price. Oh, Darius replied, the heavier price is pretending this never happens. Nicole looked up suddenly, her voice trembling. Sir, will they blame us for everything? Darius held her gaze. They will hold you accountable for your part. But the blame belongs to the culture that raised you to think this was normal. Brian lowered his eyes. It was normal. We just never called it what it was. And what is it? Darius asked. He hesitated, then whispered, arrogance. The words settled like dust on a quiet floor. No one corrected him. The older woman with the pearl gray scarf leaned toward Darius again. Son, you speak like a preacher. He smiled faintly. My grandmother was one. She used to say, God is not loud, he is deliberate. I learned that silence can be divine when you use it to correct noise. Mia's eyes widened. Did she know what you would become? He chuckled softly. She used to tell me, you will either change the system or it will try to change you first. I guess she was right about both. Outside, the plane began to rise through a patch of thin clouds. The light hit the cabin again, softer this time, almost forgiving. Darius looked around slowly, his voice carrying warmth now instead of ice. You all should understand something. Today was not about punishment. It was about proof. Proof that dignity does not need permission. That power does not always wear the right uniform. That sometimes the lesson costs money so the world will remember it. Nicole's eyes welled. She whispered, do you ever get tired of teaching lessons like this? He paused. Every single time, he said. But until people stop forgetting, I cannot stop reminding. The engines roared slightly louder as they adjusted course. The captain announced they would be arriving earlier than expected, though everyone knew this flight would last much longer in memory than on the clock. As the sky darkened toward dusk, Darius reclined slightly, hands folded again. His phone buzzed once. A message from Rachel lit up the screen. Media outlets already received footage. Public statement pending. Board requests your approval before release. He typed back 3 simple words. Tell the truth. Oh, He placed the phone face down, eyes still fixed on the faint glow of the sunset beyond the clouds. For the first time since the takeoff, he allowed himself a breath that was not measured by control. The hum of the engines blended with the sound of quiet redemption. The storm below them was gone, but its memory, the sound of a voice telling him he did not belong, would never leave completely. Darius closed his eyes, not in exhaustion, but in resolve. The world had just seen a man fight without shouting, win without cruelty, and lead without demanding applause. And in the hush of that altitude, the lesson settled into the bones of every person aboard. True power does not rise to the occasion, it stays seated, until the world finally stands up. The light outside had shifted from gold to deep blue. The sun was sinking behind the curve of the earth, painting the clouds with streaks of crimson and violet. The cabin lights dimmed automatically, leaving the passengers bathed in a soft amber glow. Yet inside, no one had the appetite for rest. They were all still flying through the aftermath of truth. Darius Cole remained still in seat. 2 Alpha, the rhythmic hum of the engines filling the silence around him. His reflection in the window had changed since takeoff, less rigid, more contemplative. He looked like a man who had wrestled with something enormous and left it gasping for air behind him. Nicole Harris sat diagonally across the aisle, staring at the faint crease in her folded blazer. Her fingers trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the slow realization that she had become the symbol of everything she thought she was protecting. She had built her identity on being flawless, efficient, in control, and now that same control had destroyed her. Brian Foster sat beside her, his head bowed low, the tablet still glowing in his lap. He was rereading the same compliance memo over and over, though the words had blurred into meaningless static. Behavioral bias, breach of policy, potential termination. He wanted to speak, but every sentence he rehearsed felt small in a room that had witnessed transformation. In the row behind them, Mia Lang was scrolling through her phone, not out of distraction, but disbelief. The world had already begun to react. Videos of the confrontation had been uploaded mid-flight. Thousands of comments filled the screens: outrage, admiration, reflection, people arguing in real time about race, power, and dignity. She looked at one comment that said, "He never raised his voice once. That is what real leadership looks like." She glanced up at Darius. He was staring out at the horizon, expression unreadable. Somehow, the comment felt both accurate and insufficient. Leadership was too small a word for what she had seen. The captain's voice broke through the silence. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are expecting calm air for the remainder of the flight. We appreciate your patience during today's unusual circumstances." There was a pause, then a small cough. "On behalf of Horizon Air, we extend our apology for any distress caused." Darius pressed the intercom button. "Apology accepted, Captain," he said calmly, his voice carrying through the cabin. "But make sure the next apology does not come after humiliation. It should come before it." The intercom clicked off, and an almost reverent quiet followed. The passengers exchanged glances but said nothing. Nicole turned toward Darius slowly. "What happens when we land?" she asked. He did not look at her. "The truth will happen," he said. "Whether you run from it or walk through it is your choice." Her throat tightened. "They will make an example of me." He turned his head then, meeting her eyes. "You made an example of yourself, but you also have a chance to redefine what that means." The words stung, but there was mercy hidden in them. She knew it. Mia rose from her seat and walked toward Darius. "Mr. Cole," she said carefully, "there are reporters waiting at the airport. The story has already gone global." He nodded once. "It was always going to. The only question was when." She hesitated, then added, "People are calling you the silent CEO." He smiled faintly. "Then they still missed the point. I was never silent. They just never listened before." The engines thrummed softly beneath them, a reminder of the immense machine carrying them all forward, an orchestra of metal, wind, and consequence. Darius leaned back, hands folded loosely in his lap. His voice, when he spoke again, carried more reflection than command. "You know, years ago, I was denied a seat in another kind of first class, not on a plane, but in a meeting room. I was the only black man in a board of 12. They thought I was the assistant. I let them think that for an hour. Then, when they asked for the presentation, I walked to the head of the table and said, 'Gentlemen, you are in my office.' The silence that followed felt just like this one." Mia's eyes widened. "And what did you do after that?" He said simply, I hired the one man who looked ashamed, and I fired the rest. The story hung in the air. It was not vengeance, it was legacy. Across the aisle, Brian exhaled shakily. Sir, I do not think anyone will ever forget what happened today. Darius nodded. Then maybe it was worth it. He glanced down at his phone again. Another message from Rachel appeared. Headline spreading. Major networks requesting statement. Do you want to comment personally? He typed slowly. No. The footage speaks. Let silence do the talking. He set the phone down and looked out the window again. The stars had begun to appear, scattered and distant, like watchful eyes in the dark. Nicole shifted slightly in her seat, her voice small. You make it sound easy, standing there, calm, while the whole world looks at you. It is not easy, he said. It is painful. But pain is not always the enemy. Sometimes it is the teacher. Mia leaned forward. Do you think they will really change because of this? Darius paused, his gaze never leaving the horizon. Change is not a lightning strike. It is erosion, one wave at a time. He closed his eyes for a moment, letting the hum of the plane settle into his chest. In the back of the cabin, the elderly woman with the gray scarf began to hum softly, an old gospel tune, the kind sung in church basements and living rooms generations ago. The melody carried through the still air, fragile yet unbroken. It was not a song of victory, it was a song of endurance. Mia whispered, That is beautiful. Darius said quietly, That is history, singing to itself. The clouds parted below them, revealing a faint outline of the continent glowing under the stars. The flight was halfway across the ocean now, but everyone on board understood that something greater than geography had been crossed tonight. They had lifted off in arrogance. They would land in awareness. And somewhere between those two altitudes, the world, or at least the small part of it sealed inside that cabin, had begun to change. The hours after the storm felt slower than time itself. The cabin had dimmed to its overnight setting, a soft halo of light tracing the aisles while most passengers pretended to rest. But no one really slept. They were suspended between altitude and conscience, each of them replaying the same scene with different emotions: shame, admiration, disbelief, and, for some, a quiet sense of justice finally seen. Darius Cole sat awake. His hands were folded neatly on the tray in front of him, a man who had learned how to find stillness inside turbulence. The glow from his window cast thin lines across his face, carving calm into definition. The engines murmured like distant thunder, constant, faithful, and indifferent. Across the aisle, Nicole Harris stared at the back of her own hands. The manicured nails, the airline-issued ring, the faint indentation from where her identification badge used to hang. She had handed it over to the operations supervisor before takeoff resumed, as protocol demanded. It was the first time in 15 years that she had not worn authority. It felt like nakedness. She glanced toward Darius again. He was quiet, unreadable, but she could feel the gravity of his presence pulling at her thoughts. The humiliation she felt earlier had begun to shift into something else, a kind of clarity that burned hotter than shame. She wanted to speak, to say something honest, but the words kept collapsing before they reached her lips. Brian Foster whispered beside her, You should talk to him. Nicole shook her head. I do not know what to say. Then start with that, he said softly. She hesitated for a long moment, then stood. The sound of her shoes against the carpet was quiet but distinct, every step deliberate, fragile but courageous. When she reached his seat, she waited for him to acknowledge her. He did not look up right away. You cannot sleep either, he said. No, sir. Then sit. She sat across from him in the empty seat next to the aisle, hands clasped together like a student awaiting judgment. Mr. Cole, she began, her voice trembling slightly, I need to understand something. You could have ruined me in front of everyone. You could have shouted, humiliated me the way I humiliated you. Why didn't you? Darius's eyes stayed on the window for a few seconds before turning toward her. Because I did not need to, he said. Anger is cheap. Dignity costs more, but it lasts longer. She swallowed hard. I thought authority meant control. It does, he said. But real control is not about holding power. It is about choosing when not to use it. Nicole looked down. I spent my entire career thinking professionalism meant distance. That if I was strict, no one could question me. And did it work? He asked. She shook her head. No, it made me unkind. Darius leaned forward slightly. Then learn from it. Do not waste the cost of your mistake. For a moment, she thought he was done speaking, but then his tone softened. You are not the first person to misjudge me. You will not be the last. The difference is what you do next. Nicole nodded slowly, her eyes glistening. I do not want to be this version of myself anymore. He held her gaze. Then do not be. Oh. The simplicity of his answer hit harder than a lecture ever could. It was permission wrapped in truth. From a few seats back, Mia watched them. She could not hear every word, but the sight itself was powerful enough, the same woman who had once pointed to the door now sitting at the feet of the man she tried to remove. It was not submission, it was transformation. The elderly woman with the gray scarf, still awake, whispered toward Mia. That is repentance, child. The kind that does not need applause. The plane continued slicing through darkness. Outside, the ocean stretched endlessly, glittering faintly under the moonlight. Inside, something had begun to heal. Darius leaned back again, but his eyes stayed open. Nicole, he said, when we land, there will be cameras, statements, maybe even a press storm. Say what you need to, but make sure you tell the truth. Do not protect the company. Protect your humanity. She nodded, tears threatening to fall. Yes, sir. And remember, he added quietly, you do not owe me gratitude. You owe the next person fairness. She bit her lip, trying to hold herself together. I will remember that. He turned back toward the window. The clouds below glowed faintly, silvered by moonlight. Good, he said softly, because the world will not change through fear. It changes when people like you start teaching others to see. Nicole stood up, her spine straighter than it had been all night. She returned to her jump seat without looking back, her face pale but steady. Mia approached Darius quietly after Nicole sat down. That was kind, she said. Darius shook his head. That was necessary. Mia looked around at the other passengers, some pretending to sleep, others silently watching. Do you think they will remember this flight? He glanced up at her. They will either remember it or pretend they did not. Both are kinds of memory. She smiled faintly, unsure if that was comforting or haunting. Minutes passed. The cabin lights dimmed even further. Darius finally closed his eyes, though he did not sleep. He could hear the steady rhythm of the engines beneath his feet, a mechanical heartbeat carrying both his story and theirs. In the back, the older woman began to hum again, that same old gospel tune, soft and unwavering. The melody filled the cabin like incense, rising through the recycled air, cleansing what words could not. Mia whispered, She keeps singing the same song, Darius said quietly, because the truth has only one melody. The plane continued its path through the night, a silver arrow cutting across darkness. And for the first time in hours, the cabin felt lighter, not forgiven, not fixed, but awake. Far below, the ocean shimmered in fractured moonlight. Above it, 35,000 feet closer to Grace, the people aboard Flight 612 began to understand the rarest kind of turbulence, the kind that changes hearts, not altitudes. Dawn crept in slowly, like light remembering its own purpose. The first rays touched the cabin windows, painting long streaks of gold across the still faces of passengers who had aged a little overnight. The world below was quiet, the Pacific shimmering like brushed steel, but inside the plane, something deeper than exhaustion filled the air, the fragile calm that follows confrontation. Darius Cole had not slept. He had spent the night in silence, eyes half closed, replaying every frame of the previous hours not to relive them, but to measure their weight. Each word, each reaction, each moment of stillness had its own gravity. He had learned long ago that victory without reflection was just noise. Now, as the light reached his face, he finally exhaled, the kind of exhale that sounded like survival. Across the aisle, Nicole Harris stirred. She had slept sitting upright, still in uniform but stripped of rank. Her once impeccable bun had loosened, a single strand of hair falling over her cheek. She woke to the sound of gentle clinking flight attendants setting up breakfast service. For the first time in 15 years, she did not stand to help. She simply sat there, unsure whether she still belonged in that aisle. Brian Foster leaned toward her, whispering, "You should eat something." "I am not hungry," she said softly. "Neither am I," he admitted. A few rows back, Mia Lang was watching them. She had spent the night scrolling through updates from the airline's internal feed. The words, "Investigation active," flashed on every screen. Her name was mentioned once. Junior crew member corroborated event. She had not expected recognition, but it still made her heart tremble. Darius looked over at her and spoke, his voice steady but kind. "You look tired." "I am fine, sir," Mia said quickly. "You are not," he replied. "But that is what courage costs." She smiled faintly. "I did not think anyone would believe me." "They did not," he said. "They believed the evidence. But that is how truth starts, one person doing the right thing, even when it shakes." She nodded quietly, her throat tight. The captain's voice came over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Reynolds. We will begin our descent in approximately 45 minutes. Local weather is clear in San Francisco. On behalf of Horizon Air, thank you for your patience during this flight." His tone carried something new, humility. Even he sounded changed. The elderly woman with the gray scarf turned in her seat. "Child," she said softly to Mia, "do you see what one act of honesty can do? You planted a seed in all of us." Mia blushed, unsure how to respond. The woman smiled. "Never stop planting." Darius closed his eyes for a moment, listening to that voice, gentle, firm, ancestral. It reminded him of his grandmother's kitchen, of hymns hummed over boiling water, of lessons that had nothing to do with profit or prestige. The memory came suddenly, vivid and raw. He was 10 years old, sitting on the porch of a small Alabama house. His grandmother, hands rough from years of factory work, looked at him and said, "One day, someone will tell you that you do not belong. You will want to shout, but if you hold your silence right, it will echo louder than their insult." That sentence had lived inside him for decades, waiting for yesterday. The cabin lights brightened slightly. Nicole rose from her seat and approached slowly, clutching a folded piece of paper, her written statement. She stopped beside Darius's seat. "Mr. Cole," she said quietly, "I wrote this for the company's review, but before I hand it to them, I want you to hear it." He nodded once. "Go ahead." Her voice shook as she read. "I, Nicole Harris, acknowledge that I removed a paying passenger from his assigned seat based on assumptions that were not grounded in fact or procedure. I allowed bias to dictate my behavior and disrespected both the individual and the values this airline claims to stand for. I am deeply sorry." When she finished, she lowered the page, eyes brimming with tears. "That is all." Darius looked at her for a long moment, then said, "Keep it." She frowned. "Why?" "Because apologies should be delivered by the person who made the mistake, not mailed through a system that learned nothing from it." Nicole hesitated, then nodded. "Then I will hand it in myself." He leaned back slightly. "Good. And do not just hand it in, mean it." She swallowed hard, whispering, "I do." As she walked away, a ripple of quiet approval moved through the passengers. No one clapped, no one smiled, but the stillness itself felt like respect. The plane began its slow descent, tilting slightly as the coastline came into view. The sunlight spilled through the windows again, illuminating faces that had been strangers only hours ago. Now they were connected by something heavier than coincidence, shared witness. Brian looked toward Darius. "Sir," he said, "may I ask you something?" "Go ahead." "Do you ever regret the silence, the restraint?" Darius smiled faintly. "Every time I use it, but every time I break it, I remember why I must keep it." Brian nodded slowly, understanding more than he expected. The older woman began humming again the same old gospel tune that had carried them through the night. This time, others joined in quietly, humming under their breath, letting the melody fill the space where words could no longer fit. As the aircraft descended through the clouds, the city appeared below a tapestry of light and promise. The cabin tilted gently, and the sun flooded the aisle with gold. Darius glanced once more out the window, his voice barely above a whisper. "Some lessons cost money, others cost peace, but the ones worth keeping cost your comfort." He straightened his tie, the red fabric catching the light like a flame refusing to go out. When the wheels finally touched the runway, the impact was soft but undeniable, a landing that felt like closure. The passengers did not cheer, they did not clap, they simply breathed. And as the engines slowed to silence, everyone on Flight 612 knew they had not just landed in San Francisco. They had landed in a truth that would follow them far beyond the airport gates. The wheels touched down with a low, steady tremor, not the jolt of arrival, but the slow exhale of a long-held breath. Dawn had broken fully now, spilling gold across the tarmac as the plane taxied toward its gate. The hum of the engines softened, replaced by the sound of human anticipation, buckles clicking, bags unzipping, and whispers carrying more weight than usual. Darius Cole remained seated in 2 Alpha, his posture unchanged. He watched the runway roll past the window like a moving timeline, one that had begun with insult and ended with revelation. The plane slowed to a stop, but the story was still in motion. He knew the next chapter would not unfold in the air. It would unfold on the ground, in front of cameras, microphones, and a world that hungered for spectacle. He closed his eyes briefly, gathering himself. Not his composure that was never lost, but his intention. He did not want this moment to become viral outrage. He wanted it to become a mirror. The seatbelt light went off. Passengers began to rise cautiously, as if standing too quickly might shatter what was left of the fragile equilibrium. Captain Reynolds's voice came through the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to San Francisco. We appreciate your patience and cooperation during today's flight. Please remain seated until the aircraft comes to a full stop." His tone was softer than before, not the firm cadence of command, but the tremor of humility. Nicole Harris sat still, hands clasped together. She had not moved since they began descending. When the door latch clicked and the first rush of fresh air entered the cabin, she finally looked toward Darius. He was already watching her. "Are you ready?" he asked. She nodded slowly. "No, but I will be." The cabin door opened. Sunlight poured in, bright and unfiltered, slicing through the low glow of the interior. Outside, the jet bridge was crowded executives in suits, security officers, and, further back, a sea of reporters. Cameras were already raised, their lenses hungry. Darius stood. The simple act drew silence across the cabin. His movements were measured, deliberate, carrying the kind of weight that did not come from authority, but from purpose. He reached into his briefcase, removed the letter Nicole had read earlier, and folded it once more. Then he slipped it into his inside jacket pocket. As he stepped into the aisle, passengers instinctively made space. Some nodded, others lowered their eyes, each acknowledging the presence of something they could not quite name. A few whispered thank yous under their breath, unsure if he could hear them. Mia stood near the galley, clutching her service log. "Mr. Cole," she said softly, "they are waiting for you outside." "I know," he said. "They are calling it the flight of silence." He smiled faintly. "Let them call it what they need to. I know what it really was." He looked at her for a long moment. "Mia, remember something. The first time you speak up, the world may punish you. But it is the only way the world learns how to listen." She nodded, her throat tight. "Yes, sir." He stepped forward, the cabin quiet except for the low shuffle of passengers parting like water around him. Nicole followed a few steps behind, her hands clasped, her face pale but steady. She no longer walked like an officer, she walked like a witness. The moment Darius reached the doorway, the flash of cameras exploded like a storm. Reporters shouted his name, microphones jutted forward, and voices clamored over one another. "Mr. Cole, did the airline discriminate against you? Are you pressing charges? What message do you have for America this morning?" Darius paused at the threshold, the sunlight painting the side of his face. He turned his head slightly toward the nearest camera and spoke in a voice calm enough to silence the chaos. "This was not about a seat," he said. "It was about a habit of seeing color before character, a habit of letting silence excuse injustice. I did not come here to destroy anyone. I came here to remind people what respect looks like when it refuses to disappear." The reporters froze, microphones hovering mid-air. Even the security guards glanced at one another, unsure whether to escort or applaud him. He continued, "The company will conduct its review. They will decide what justice looks like on paper. But the real justice already happened in that cabin, when truth stood taller than authority." A murmur spread through the crowd, not outrage, not applause, but something quieter. Reflection. Nicole stood just behind him, tears streaking down her cheeks. She wanted to disappear, but instead she whispered loud enough for those nearby to hear, "He is right. I saw what I became, and it will never happen again." The cameras caught it. The headline wrote itself. Darius turned to her gently. "Go face them," he said. "Your honesty will matter more than your defense." "Oh." She nodded and stepped forward, trembling but resolute. answering the reporter's questions not as an employee, but as a person confronting her own failure. Darius watched her for a moment, then looked past the crowd toward the skyline, a city waking up to another ordinary day that would no longer be ordinary. His phone buzzed in his pocket. Rachel's voice came through softly, calm as ever. "Mr. Cole, the board is watching the live broadcast. They have requested a statement." He replied. "They are already getting one." He walked down the jet bridge, each step echoing with the soft click of finality. The air outside was crisp, alive with motion, a symphony of engines, announcements, and possibility. As he exited into the terminal, passengers from other gates began to recognize him. Some approached, hesitant, saying quiet words of thanks. Others just watched, understanding that they were witnessing something more than news. Mia followed him at a distance, tears in her eyes. She watched as he paused by a window overlooking the tarmac, the rising sun reflecting off the glass. He placed a hand against the pane and whispered, almost to himself, "The sky belongs to everyone." The phrase carried softly through the air, picked up by a nearby microphone, and within minutes, it was everywhere on headlines, in captions, across millions of screens. And though the world would soon debate what justice meant, those who were there that morning knew the truth. It had already landed. The airport terminal was awake now, alive with the hum of morning flights, rolling suitcases, and 1,000 conversations that seemed quieter than usual. The air smelled of coffee and jet fuel, a blend that always meant movement. But today, it carried something heavier: awareness. Darius Cole walked through the terminal, flanked by silence, not security. Every step echoed softly against polished floors, his reflection stretching in the wide glass walls that framed the rising Sunday. People recognized him now not from a celebrity headline, but from the kind of recognition that lives in memory. They had seen the footage, or they had heard the story whispered between gates. "That is him," they murmured, "the one who froze the sky." He did not walk faster or slower. His pace was the same measured rhythm that had guided him all night, deliberate, steady, unafraid. The press followed at a distance, trying to catch every word, every look. He ignored them. Some truths did not need repetition. They needed presence. Ahead, through the terminal glass, he could see the Horizon Air headquarters building across the tarmac. It looked sterile, symmetrical, and expensive, like every corporate monument built to disguise fragility. His phone buzzed once. A message from Rachel appeared. "Conference room prepared. Board and media waiting." He typed back, "Let them wait. I will walk." As he passed Gate 12, a young janitor stopped sweeping and stared. The man's brown uniform bore the airline's logo, faded from years of labor. He stepped forward hesitantly. "Sir, I just wanted to say thank you. My daughter watched that video this morning. She said, 'Daddy, that man looks like you.'" Darius stopped and met his eyes. "Then tell her this," he said gently. "If the world ever tries to move her out of a place she belongs, she does not need to shout. She just needs to stay seated long enough for the truth to catch up." The janitor's eyes filled. "Yes, sir, I will." Darius nodded once and continued walking. Behind him, the janitor leaned on his broom, watching until he disappeared around the corner. When Darius reached the security corridor leading to the administrative wing, a uniformed officer stepped in his path. "Mr. Cole," the officer said cautiously, "the board has requested a private escort." "I do not need one," Darius replied. "Yes, sir, but the media, let them record," he said calmly. "If transparency is uncomfortable, it is because we have been too comfortable with shadows." The officer hesitated, then stepped aside. Inside the glass doors, the corridor was lined with framed photographs, smiling crews, gleaming aircraft, and executives shaking hands in perfect lighting. Darius walked past them without looking. He had been in this hallway before, years ago, when he was first invited to invest in Horizon's expansion. Back then, the air had smelled like ambition. Today, it smelled like accountability. Rachel met him at the entrance to the boardroom. She looked composed, though her eyes betrayed sleepless hours. "They are waiting," she said, "and the shareholders are listening in." He adjusted his tie. "Good. Let us begin." The doors opened. Inside, the long glass table gleamed under recessed lights. 12 executives sat in silence, their expressions taut. Screens along the wall displayed live feeds of the airport, the news channels, and a paused image of Darius standing on the jet bridge, sunlight striking his face. The chairman, a tall man with silver hair, cleared his throat. "Mr. Cole," he began formally, "thank you for coming on such short notice." Darius took the head seat without being invited. "It was not short notice," he said evenly. "It was overdue." The chairman swallowed. "We acknowledge the incident that occurred aboard Flight 612. Our legal team is conducting an internal review." "An internal review will not fix an external disease," Darius said. His tone was calm, but every syllable carried weight. "The problem is not a single employee. It is the comfort you all have with selective vision." One of the executives, a woman with sharp glasses, interjected. "Mr. Cole, while we recognize the severity, freezing a $100 million budget has created panic. Flights are delayed, operations are disrupted, and our stock value—" Darius cut her off gently but firmly. "Do you hear yourself? You are worried about numbers when a person became invisible in your system because of bias. The market will recover. Our morality may not." Silence fell. Rachel began projecting data onto the central screen clips of social media reaction, statistics on racial bias training, passenger surveys. "Public sentiment is overwhelmingly in favor of accountability," she reported. "And major outlets are calling this the most pivotal civil equity incident in corporate aviation." "Oh." The chairman leaned forward. "Mr. Cole, what outcome do you propose?" Darius stood slowly. "We are not going to issue another scripted apology. We are going to institutionalize truth." He walked to the window overlooking the runway, his reflection merging with the sunrise. "Starting today, Horizon Air will implement a program called Protocol 7, a standing review board that operates independently from management. Every discrimination claim, every misconduct report will go directly to it, not to human resources, not to legal counsel, to a body that answers only to accountability." The room was silent except for the faint hum of the ventilation system. One executive whispered, "That will cost millions." Darius turned back. "Then it will be the first money this company has spent that actually buys integrity." The chairman exhaled slowly. "You are serious." As serious as the people you ignore," Darius said. Rachel's eyes softened. She knew this tone, the one that built empires and rebuilt broken systems. The chairman leaned back, defeated but moved. "You realize, Mr. Cole, the world is watching how we respond." "That is the point," Darius replied. "The world should not have to watch to make us do the right thing." He turned to Rachel. "Send the memo. Effective immediately." She nodded. "Yes, sir." As Darius prepared to leave, the chairman called after him. "Mr. Cole, one question. Why Protocol 7? Why that number?" He paused at the door, glancing back. "Because 7 means completion, but this is not the end. It is the beginning of something finished properly." He stepped into the hallway. Outside, through the glass wall, the same plane that carried humiliation now sat gleaming under sunlight, grounded, cleaned, refueled, ready. And for the first time in the company's history, so was its conscience. Darius Cole adjusted his tie, exhaled once, and began walking toward the future he had just rewritten. The meeting room emptied slowly, leaving behind the echo of polished shoes and the faint hum of air conditioning. Darius Cole remained by the window, hands clasped behind his back, staring out at the runway below. Planes were taking off one by one, massive, heavy bodies, lifting as if defying everything that once told them they could not. He watched them ascend, his reflection caught between glass and light, and thought, "It is not the sky that resists us. It is the ground that doubts us." Rachel stood near the door, a tablet in hand. "The press conference begins in 20 minutes, she said. Darius turned slightly. "Who is handling public relations?" "They want you to lead it," Rachel replied. "They say the world wants to hear from the man who grounded an empire without raising his voice." He gave a small, knowing smile. "The world loves a headline, but it rarely listens to the whole story." Rachel stepped closer. "Then give them one they cannot turn away from." He looked back at her, the corners of his eyes softening. "You have been with me for 10 years. You know I do not perform." She nodded. "I know. That is why you will reach them." For a brief moment, silence stretched between them, the kind that carried both respect and unspoken weariness. Darius finally said, "Prepare the statement, Rachel, but do not make it sound like an apology. Make it sound like a promise." As she left the room, he remained still. His mind wandered, not to the headlines or the board's approval, but to his mother's kitchen again, to the night she told him that Humility without courage was just fear in disguise. Her voice returned, warm and steady. If you ever stand in front of the world, son, make sure your truth is bigger than your anger. He straightened his tie and left the room. The hallway outside was lined with employees, some curious, others reverent. They parted as he passed, whispering, "That is him." But this time, the words carried respect, not suspicion. Rachel met him at the far end of the corridor. "The media room is full," she said. "Over 300 people, plus live feeds from 5 networks." Darius nodded. "Then let us not waste their time." They entered the press hall together. The room fell instantly quiet. Rows of cameras and microphones pointed toward the stage where the Horizon Air logo gleamed behind a long white podium. Darius walked up to the microphone, adjusted it once, and let the silence settle before he spoke. "Good morning," he began, his voice calm but commanding. "Before we talk about the incident, I want to make something clear. This is not a story about a seat. It is a story about sight, who we see, who we do not, and why." The room was so quiet that the faint click of a camera lens sounded like thunder. He continued, "Yesterday, I was told to leave a seat that I paid for, a seat I rightfully owned. I was told it was not mine because someone decided I did not belong there. That moment did not surprise me. What surprised me was how quickly others accepted it." A ripple moved through the audience, reporters scribbling, cameras tightening their zoom. "I did not raise my voice," Darius said. "Not because I was calm, but because I knew anger would make them comfortable. They expect our fury. They do not know what to do with our silence." Rachel, standing at the back of the room, felt the words cut through the air like a blade of truth. Darius continued, "In that silence, I made a choice not to embarrass a person, but to expose a pattern. We live in a world where bias wears uniforms, where authority often confuses power with worth, but dignity does not need permission. It is not a seat to be assigned or revoked." The reporters were motionless now. The hum of the air vents the only sound. He went on, "This morning, Horizon Air has agreed to launch Protocol 7, an independent ethics board that reports directly to accountability, not profit. It is not charity, it is correction." He paused, letting the words sink in. "And to the passengers who witnessed what happened, thank you for watching long enough to understand. Justice does not need applause, but it does need witnesses." Then he looked directly into one of the cameras. "To anyone watching this from a place of silence, do not let the world convince you that you must earn your humanity. You were born with it." A collective breath rippled through the room. He stepped back slightly. "I did not freeze a $100 million budget to punish a company. I did it to thaw the coldness that has settled in our institutions, to remind people that systems serve humans, not the other way around." "Oh." The applause began quietly, hesitant, but it grew wave after wave, like thunder rolling through a valley. Some reporters stood, others wiped their eyes discreetly. Darius waited for the noise to fade, then spoke once more. "This is not my victory. It is our reflection, and reflection, if done right, changes direction." He turned from the podium and walked off stage, leaving his words to echo behind him. Rachel met him near the exit. "That was monumental," she said. He smiled faintly. It was necessary. As they stepped into the hallway, employees were already watching the broadcast on their phones. One young attendant whispered, "He made silence sound like thunder." Darius glanced at the screen as the replay aired, his calm face framed by lights, his voice steady over applause. He looked away. "It is not thunder," he said quietly. "It is conscience waking up." Outside, the morning light spilled through the tall glass windows. A plane roared down the runway, lifting into the bright sky. Rachel looked at him. "You grounded them yesterday. Today, you gave them wings again." Darius nodded slowly, his eyes on the horizon. "Let us see if they know how to fly with integrity this time." They walked toward the elevator, side by side, their reflections merging in the mirrored wall. Somewhere between floor and sky, between humility and justice, a new chapter was beginning, one that no press headline could contain. When the cameras were gone and the applause dissolved into murmurs, the building fell into a strange kind of quiet, the silence that follows truth when people are still learning how to live with it. Darius Cole stood by the lobby windows of Horizon Air's headquarters, watching sunlight stretch across the runway. The day had already begun for others, flights, boarding, passengers hurrying, engines roaring, but for him, time moved slower now. He could see his reflection in the glass, the same man, but with a new kind of stillness in his eyes. Rachel approached, tablet in hand, her voice low. "You are trending on every major platform. The story has gone international." Darius did not turn. "Let them talk." She hesitated. "You have become a symbol, sir. People are calling you the man who taught the world to listen." He smiled faintly. "Symbols are dangerous, Rachel. They make people admire the person instead of the principle." She understood what he meant. The real victory for him was never fame, it was transformation. The glass door behind them slid open, and Nicole Harris entered the lobby. Her uniform was gone, replaced by a plain gray suit borrowed from human resources. She looked smaller somehow, not in stature, but in certainty. Still, her eyes held something new, the beginning of courage. Rachel nodded respectfully. "Miss Harris." Nicole nodded back, but kept her focus on Darius. "They asked me to come in for a statement," she said quietly. "I know," Darius replied. "They told me you wanted to see me first." She swallowed hard. "I did. Not because I expect forgiveness, but because I owe you something more honest than an apology." He faced her fully now. The sunlight behind him made his silhouette look taller, steadier, almost immovable. "Go on," he said. Nicole took a deep breath. "I spent 15 years believing I was fair because I followed rules. But rules do not guarantee justice. They only protect the people who write them. Yesterday, I looked at you and saw a stranger who threatened my order. Today, I realize I was protecting the wrong thing." Her voice cracked, but she continued. "I cannot undo what I did, but I can choose what happens next. When they asked me if I wanted to resign, I told them no, not because I want to keep my position, but because I want to rebuild it properly." Darius studied her face, the tremor in her voice, the resolve beneath it. "And how will you do that?" "By training others to see what I could not. By reminding them that every seat, every passenger, every person has a story before they have a label." Rachel's eyes softened. For the first time since the flight, she saw something fragile turning into strength. Darius nodded slowly. "Then make sure you do it for the right reasons. Do not do it to redeem yourself. Do it to prevent another you." Nicole nodded, tears welling. "Yes, sir." He turned back toward the window. "Redemption is not about erasing the past," he said. "It is about refusing to repeat it." Outside, another plane lifted into the sky. Its ascent was slow, graceful, inevitable. Nicole followed his gaze, understanding the metaphor without needing to name it. Rachel's tablet buzzed. "Mr. Cole, the board has approved Protocol 7 officially. It is now part of Horizon's charter." Darius exhaled quietly. "Then the real work begins." Rachel scrolled through the details. "They also want to name the program after you, the Cole Initiative." He turned sharply, his voice firm. "No, absolutely not." She blinked. "Sir? This was never about me," he said. "It was about accountability. Call it what it is. If they need a name, call it the Human Equity Program. Let my name belong to my mother, not their marketing." Rachel smiled faintly. "Understood. Nicole's phone buzzed suddenly. She glanced down, her face tightening. "The media wants an interview. They want me to defend myself publicly." Darius looked at her. "Do not defend yourself. Tell the truth. It is stronger." She hesitated. "They will tear me apart." He nodded. "Only if you hide. When you face them, you take away their weapon." Her voice trembled. "Will you be there?" "No," he said gently. "You do not need me to stand beside you. The point of justice is learning to walk on your own." Nicole nodded again, breathing deeply. "Then I will." She extended her hand, hesitant but sincere. "Thank you for not destroying me when you could have." He shook her hand firmly. "You destroyed a moment, not a person, but you rebuilt it yourself." She smiled through tears. "I will not waste it." After she left, Rachel watched her go. "Do you think she will really change?" Darius kept his eyes on the sky. "She already has. The rest of the world will decide whether to follow." He turned away from the window and started toward the exit. The press outside had gathered again, waiting for another statement, another quote. Rachel called after him. "Sir, what will you say this time?" He paused at the door, his reflection shimmering in the glass. "Nothing," he said. "Today does not need more words. It needs proof." As he stepped outside, cameras flashed once more. He did not flinch. The reporters shouted his name, but he simply walked past them toward the line of ground crew workers watching from the sidelines. One of them, a young woman in an orange vest, raised her hand timidly. "Mr. Cole, can I take a picture with you?" He stopped, smiled, and said, "Only if you promise to take another one 10 years from now when this place looks like what fairness really means." She grinned and nodded. The camera clicked. Behind him, the morning sun climbed higher, turning the glass towers into mirrors of gold. For the first time, the reflection staring back at Horizon Air looked honest. And as Darius walked away, his shadow stretched long across the tarmac, not as a mark of power, but as a reminder that some legacies are not built in noise or anger, but in the quiet courage to stand where you were once told not to belong. The air outside the terminal carried the crisp chill of early morning, that fleeting hour when the city has not yet decided whether to wake or rest. The press still lingered near the exits, but Darius Cole did not slow his stride. Each step across the concrete felt heavier, not from exhaustion, but from the gravity of what the last 24 hours had reshaped. He walked toward the parking area where a black sedan waited, Rachel following a few paces behind. The driver stood beside the open door, posture straight, eyes lowered. "Good morning, sir," he said quietly. Darius nodded once. "Morning, Leonard." Rachel caught up, her tablet pressed to her chest. "Sir, before we go, there is something you need to see." She turned the screen toward him. Dozens of headlines glowed in the early light. The flight that changed corporate America. Horizon Air introduces equity program after viral incident. CEO Darius Cole redefines accountability. He scanned them briefly, then looked away. "They always turn a reckoning into a success story," he said. "They will write it like I saved the company, not like I exposed it." Rachel's tone softened. "Maybe both are true." He gave a faint smile. "Maybe, but truth is quieter than they make it sound." He slid into the back seat, resting his hands on his knees. The city unfolded beyond the window glass towers, billboards, and the steady rhythm of life already resuming. Rachel climbed in beside him, closing the door gently. For a few minutes, neither of them spoke. The only sound was the low hum of the car engine and the echo of their own thoughts. Finally, Rachel broke the silence. "Sir, what you said to Nicole this morning. It was the first time I saw you offer mercy without conditions." Darius turned his gaze from the window. "Mercy without truth is just pity. I needed her to see herself, not fear me." Rachel nodded slowly. "You know, I have worked beside you for 10 years, but today, watching you, I realized something. You are not just leading a company anymore. You are leading a generation." He chuckled quietly, shaking his head. "A generation that keeps forgetting the same lesson. I only remind them." Traffic slowed as they approached the downtown district. On a digital billboard above the freeway, a replay of the press conference appeared, his calm face, his measured words. Beneath it, a single caption scrolled across the screen. "Dignity is not negotiable." Rachel looked at him. "They turned your sentence into a slogan." Darius sighed. "They always do. But if even one person believes it, I will not complain." He reached into his jacket and pulled out the folded letter Nicole had written. He unfolded it once more, eyes tracing the ink. Her handwriting was steady but heavy, every word an act of accountability. He read it silently, then refolded it and placed it on the seat beside him. "Do you believe she will stay?" Rachel asked. "Yes," he said, "because shame fades, but awakening does not." They arrived at Horizon's downtown office, the same building where his journey with the company had begun. The lobby was lined with polished marble and tall glass pillars that reflected sunlight like water. Employees stopped as he entered, conversations halting mid-sentence. Some clapped softly, others simply nodded, acknowledging not a hero, but a man who had forced their world to stop pretending. In the elevator, Rachel stood beside him. "You have a board meeting at 9, then a press call at 11. They also want you on a broadcast tonight." He looked at her. "Cancel the broadcast." "Sir? I do not want another speech. They have heard enough words. I want actions now." When the elevator doors opened, the executive floor was buzzing. Screens on the walls displayed graphs, schedules, and the live feed of Horizon's social channels. Employees greeted him with nervous smiles. Darius walked straight to his office. It was a minimalist space glass walls, a single painting, and a large window overlooking the city skyline. He stood there for a moment, hands in his pockets, the view stretching endlessly before him. Rachel placed a folder on his desk. Protocol 7 officially launches next week. The committee is already assembling. They asked if you want to select the chair. Who did you have in mind? He asked. She hesitated, then said softly, Mia Lang. Darius looked at her, surprised but intrigued. The trainee from the flight? Yes, Rachel said. She has become a symbol of integrity among the crew. Her name appears in every staff message chain. He smiled slightly. The right kind of ripple. So, should I offer it to her? Yes, he said without hesitation. She is exactly what this program needs, truth without armor. Rachel nodded and made a note. Consider it done. The morning sun crept higher, filling the office with gold. Darius turned back to the window, his voice softer now. Rachel, you have been with me through every contract, every acquisition, every scandal this company buried. Why did you stay? She smiled faintly. Because you made me believe that ethics could be profitable. He chuckled. It is not, but it is worth more. She looked at him thoughtfully. So, what happens now? He glanced down at the skyline. Now we build something that lasts after the cameras stop watching. Outside, the city's noise began to rise: horns, conversations, footsteps. The world was moving again, faster this time, but it moved differently. Something invisible had shifted, like an engine running on new air. Darius reached for the intercom and pressed the button. Send a message to all employees, he said. Yes, sir, Rachel replied. Tell them this. Every uniform carries responsibility, not privilege. Every title carries truth, not excuse. And every flight from this day forward will carry respect as its first passenger. Rachel smiled as she typed. It is done. He nodded once, then turned back to the window. Another plane rose into the sky, its wings flashing in the sunlight. He watched it climb higher and higher until it vanished into the blue. And in that quiet office above the city, Darius Cole finally allowed himself to breathe, not as the man who froze a $100 million budget, but as the man who proved that stillness could move mountains. By noon, the city had settled into its rhythm again, honking cars, murmuring crowds, and the metallic pulse of ambition echoing through glass towers. But inside the Horizon headquarters, there was a stillness that felt almost sacred. Employees spoke in softer tones, movements deliberate, like people walking through the aftermath of a storm they were still trying to understand. Darius Cole stood in his office, sleeves rolled up, his jacket draped across the back of his chair. He was reading through the preliminary proposals for the new human equity program lines of policies and commitments that promised change in clean corporate language. It looked professional, even inspiring, but it lacked one thing: soul. He placed the file down and stared out at the skyline, where a jet was carving a silver path through the afternoon haze. Words will not heal this, he murmured. We need people. Rachel entered quietly, holding her tablet. Sir, the committee has accepted your nomination. Mia Lang will chair the Human Equity Board. Darius looked over, a small smile flickering. Good. She earned it. She asked to see you if you have a moment. He nodded. Send her in. Oh. A minute later, the door opened and Mia stepped inside, her uniform neatly pressed, but her hands betraying a hint of nervous energy. She looked younger than the magnitude of what she had done, yet her eyes carried the kind of steadiness that only comes from standing up when everyone else sits down. Mr. Cole, she said softly, I wanted to thank you for the opportunity. I do not know if I deserve it, but I will do my best. Darius motioned for her to sit. You do not need to deserve it, he said. You already proved why you are the right choice. Mia hesitated. I keep thinking about that moment on the flight. I was scared, but something in me said it was wrong. I keep wondering what would have happened if I had stayed silent. Darius leaned forward. The same thing that has happened for centuries. Silence does not protect the innocent. It only trains the guilty. Mia nodded, the weight of his words sinking deep. Then I will not stay silent anymore. Good, Darius said. Because this program cannot just be a statement. It must be a system that forces the truth into every room, even the ones where it makes people uncomfortable. He rose from his chair and walked to the window. There will be resistance. People will call it unnecessary, even divisive. They will say it costs too much. But fairness is not an expense, Mia. It is an investment. She smiled faintly. Then we will make sure the world sees the return. He turned back to her, genuinely impressed. Keep talking like that and you will have my job one day. She shook her head quickly. No one could ever replace you. He smiled. Do not say that. The best proof of leadership is making yourself replaceable. They both laughed lightly, a rare sound in a building that had been too tense for too long. Rachel entered again, knocking softly. "Sir, the chairman wants to brief you before the afternoon session. They are drafting a joint press release with government transportation officials." Darius sighed. "Another speech?" "Not quite. They just want your final approval." "Tell them I will read it later," he said. "Right now, I want to speak with the people who do the real work." He looked at Mia. "Gather the ground crew, the attendants, the pilots. I want to meet them in the hangar." Ugh. Within an hour, more than 200 employees stood beneath the shadow of a massive Horizon aircraft. The engines were silent, the air thick with anticipation. Many of them had only seen Darius Cole in photos or company reports, but now they watched him walk across the hangar floor, the man whose quiet defiance had changed their uniform overnight. He stopped in front of them and spoke, his voice clear and unamplified. "I know most of you did not ask for this change. Some of you may even resent it, but I want you to understand why it matters. Every time you put on this uniform, you represent a promise not to a brand, but to humanity." He looked around slowly, meeting their eyes one by one. "When a person steps onto one of our planes, they are trusting us with more than their safety. They are trusting us to see them to recognize their dignity before their destination." A murmur of agreement moved through the crowd. Darius continued. "Yesterday, the world saw what happens when that promise is broken. But today, you have the chance to prove what it looks like when it is kept." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. "The Human Equity Program is not about protecting passengers from us. It is about protecting us from becoming the kind of people who need protection from truth." There was silence, but it was a good silence, the kind that follows realization. A mechanic raised his hand. "Mr. Cole, do you really believe one company can change the whole industry?" Darius smiled. "I do not know if it can, but I know it must try. Every great change starts with someone deciding not to wait for permission." Mia stood a few steps behind him, listening with quiet pride. She realized that what made Darius Cole powerful was not his title or his wealth, it was his patience, his ability to turn anger into order, humiliation into purpose. When he finished speaking, the employees broke into spontaneous applause. It was not loud or showy. It was respectful, almost reverent. Darius raised his hand slightly to quiet them. "Save your applause," he said. "Show me with your actions." As the crowd began to disperse, Mia walked beside him. "You know they will talk about this day for years," she said. He shook his head. "If they do, then I failed. They should not remember me. They should remember what changed." Oh. The hangar doors began to open, flooding the room with golden afternoon light. A jet outside prepared for takeoff, its engines roaring to life. Darius looked at it, the corners of his mouth lifting slightly. "Look at that," he said. "The sky has no favorites, but it remembers everyone who dares to rise." Mia followed his gaze, her voice soft. "Then I guess we keep rising." "Yes," he said quietly, "until fairness flies on its own." The plane accelerated down the runway, a blur of light and sound, lifting effortlessly into the air. The crowd watched in awe as it climbed toward the clouds, and for the first time, Horizon Air truly lived up to its name, not as a company, but as an idea reborn. And in that moment, Darius Cole smiled, knowing the hardest work was not in the air or in the boardroom, it was in every unseen choice that made both worthy of the people they served. The sun was beginning to sink behind the horizon, turning the hangar windows into sheets of molten gold. Workers had returned to their tasks, the hum of drills and the clank of metal echoing softly through the vast space. The world outside was moving again, but inside, a quiet revolution had already taken root. Darius Cole stood on the observation deck above the hangar floor, hands resting on the railing as he watched the employees disperse in small groups. Their movements carried something new purpose. Not fear, not compliance, but a sense of belonging that did not need permission anymore. Rachel entered behind him, her footsteps soft but familiar. "The news is still everywhere," she said, checking her tablet. "They are calling this the Cole Standard. Every major airline is now under pressure to adopt similar policies." Darius smiled faintly, his eyes still on the workers below. "Then let us make sure it is not just a trend. The world loves to celebrate progress until it has to maintain it." Rachel leaned against the railing beside him. "You do realize, sir, that what you did in 24 hours took other industries decades to even attempt?" He gave a small nod. "Maybe. But change is not about time. It is about timing." They stood there for a moment, side by side, listening to the fading sound of engines outside. "You know," Rachel said softly, "I never told you this, but 10 years ago, when I first interviewed to be your assistant, they told me I was too assertive. They said you would not want a woman who challenged you." Darius turned to her, one brow raised. "And what did you say?" "I said you would not hire anyone who did not." He laughed quietly, a sound rare but genuine. "Then you understood me better than most people ever will." She smiled. "You taught me something, Darius. You taught me that leadership is not about being the loudest voice in the room. It is about being the one who does not flinch when the silence arrives." He looked at her, thoughtful. "And you taught me that silence needs translation sometimes." They both turned back toward the hangar floor. The last of the mechanics were leaving, their boots echoing against the concrete. Beyond the open doors, a plane was taxiing into the deep orange light, its wings glinting like glass. Rachel spoke again, softer now. "What will you do when this settles? When the cameras move on? When the hashtags fade?" Darius exhaled slowly. "I will keep doing what I have always done. Invest in people who think justice is a verb, not a slogan." She nodded, but there was something in her expression, a hint of concern. "You know this changed everything, right? Not just for them, but for you. There are executives who will never forgive you for this." He smiled, but there was steel in it. "Forgiveness is not a currency I trade in. Accountability is enough." The door creaked open behind them. Mia stepped in, carrying a small folder. Her uniform jacket was off, her sleeves rolled to the elbows. She looked both nervous and proud, the way someone looks when they realize the weight of their own name. "Mr. Cole," she said, "the first drafts of the employee workshops are ready. I wanted to give them to you personally." He gestured for her to come closer. "Let me see." She handed him the folder. The title on the front read, "Human Equity Training, Ground Zero Edition." Inside were schedules, outlines, and scripts for open discussion sessions. "This is good," Darius said, flipping through the pages. "Simple, direct, human. You understand the assignment." Mia hesitated. "I hope so. I just keep thinking, what if they do not listen?" He looked up from the papers, his expression calm but resolute. "Then say it again. Change is not a one-time broadcast. It is an echo. You keep speaking until someone hears the truth louder than their comfort." Mia smiled, a little steadier now. "I will remember that." Rachel nodded approvingly. "You are doing well, Mia. You remind me of him when he first started, relentless but careful." Mia's eyes widened slightly. "Was he ever reckless?" Darius chuckled. "Only when I cared too much." They laughed softly, the tension easing. A moment later, Darius handed the folder back to her. "You are leading this program now. Do not ask for permission to be effective." She nodded. "Understood." "And one more thing," he said. "Never let them tell you that fairness is naive. It is the most strategic form of intelligence there is." She smiled. "Yes, sir." As she turned to leave, Rachel watched her go, then said quietly, "You see it, do you not? She is the next generation." Darius nodded. "Exactly. Which means I can finally think about stepping aside when the time comes." Rachel frowned slightly. "You? Step aside?" He looked at her, eyes steady. "Leadership is not meant to be owned. It is meant to be passed forward before it spoils." Outside, the sky was now crimson, the color of endings that look like beginnings. The hum of the departing plane faded into the distance. Darius felt a small pull in his chest, not fatigue, but fulfillment. He turned back toward Rachel. "You have worked beside me for 10 years, through every high and low. You know what this means more than anyone." She smiled softly. "It means we finally turned turbulence into trajectory." He nodded, his gaze drifting toward the fading sunlight. "Exactly." The intercom buzzed on Rachel's tablet. "Mr. Cole, the chairman requests a brief meeting before you leave. They are drafting a public announcement regarding the permanent restructuring of the executive board." Darius sighed lightly. "They will want to congratulate themselves for surviving change." "Oh," Rachel grinned. "And you will let them." "Of course," he said with a smirk. "Sometimes diplomacy is the art of watching people thank themselves for doing what you made them do." They shared a quiet laugh, and then he adjusted his cufflinks, preparing to face the final meeting of the day. Before leaving, he looked out once more through the wide glass wall. The last light of sunset shimmered across the tarmac, painting the plains in hues of gold and fire. Under his breath, he murmured, "We are all just trying to take off without forgetting who we leave on the ground." Rachel heard him but said nothing. She only smiled, the kind of smile born from pride and understanding. Together, they turned toward the exit. The hangar doors began to close behind them, sealing in the last echo of engines. And for a fleeting moment, as the light faded, the reflection of Darius Cole lingered in the glass, not as a man who conquered the sky, but as one who taught the world how to rise with dignity. Night draped itself over San Francisco like a velvet curtain, muting the chaos of the day. Inside Horizon's glass tower, one light still burned the boardroom. Darius Cole stood at the head of the table, calm, collected, surrounded by executives who finally understood the weight of their silence. The chairman spoke first. "Mr. Cole, before we adjourn, we would like to commend your leadership. What you have done—" Darius cut him off gently. "What I have done is remind you that decency is not innovation." His voice was steady, almost tender. "Acknowledgement is not progress. Action is." Rachel stood behind him, tablet in hand, her eyes steady. The chairman cleared his throat. "We are restructuring as discussed. A new executive position for the Human Equity Program. Naturally, we assume—" Darius turned toward him. "You assume wrong. I will not take that seat." The room went still. "Then who?" someone asked. He looked around the table. "The person who stood up when none of you did. Mia Lang." The silence that followed was electric disbelief mixing with something heavier. Shame. The chairman tried again. "She is young, unproven." Darius's gaze was unflinching. So was fairness when the world first met it. He walked to the window, the city lights flickering across his reflection. "You keep hiring experience when what you need is conscience. Mia will report directly to this board. That is my final recommendation." Rachel smiled faintly. She had seen this coming. The others sat frozen, watching as the man they once underestimated rewrote their future in a single breath. Darius picked up a pen, signed the restructuring order, and set it down. "Effective immediately," he said. "The new horizon begins tonight." He turned to leave, pausing only once at the doorway. "History does not remember signatures," he said quietly. "It remembers courage." Outside, the night was wide and endless. Rachel joined him as they stepped into the elevator. "You could have let them keep their illusion," she said softly. He smiled. "And let comfort survive another decade? No." As the elevator doors closed, the city stretched before them, a grid of light and movement, alive and watching. Somewhere beyond the skyline, a plane climbed through the clouds, its engines humming like a heartbeat. Rachel whispered, "They will write about this." "Let them," he said, "but make sure they spell her name right." And with that, Darius Cole walked into the quiet, a man who had proven that justice does not roar, it breathes. Morning rose over San Francisco like a clean slate. The city gleamed beneath soft sunlight, unaware it was witnessing the first day of a new order. Inside Horizon's glass headquarters, whispers of change floated through every corridor. Darius Cole stood by his window, the skyline reflecting across his suit. Rachel entered, 2 coffees in hand. "Every network wants you this morning," she said. "They are calling this a revolution." "Cancel them all," he replied calmly. "Revolutions are for cameras. I build continuity." And they stepped into the main office where executives gathered for their morning briefing. Conversations died the instant Darius appeared. He looked over the crowd, confident, composed. "You have read the headlines," he began. "But headlines are temporary. What we built this week is not. The Human Equity Program is not an initiative. It is our foundation. If anyone believes we can wait this out until the world forgets, the door is open. Leave now." No one moved. Silence thickened with respect. "Good," he said. "Then let us begin the real work." Back in his office, Rachel's tablet buzzed. "Mia Lang is addressing the first group of recruits," she said. Darius gestured for her to play it. On screen, Mia stood before a small crowd of attendants and engineers. "I am not here because I was perfect," she said. "I am here because I refused to stay silent. Fairness should never be extraordinary." Her voice was steady, sincere. Darius watched quietly, his expression unreadable. "She sounds nothing like me," he murmured. "That is why she will go further." Rachel smiled. "You know this company will never be the same." He nodded. "Good. Stagnation was our longest flight." They turned back toward the window as a plane lifted through the clouds. sunlight glancing off its wings. Rachel whispered, "You grounded injustice. Now look, it flies differently." Darius's eyes softened. "That is not flight," he said. "That is balance, finally learning how to breathe." The engine's hum faded into the morning quiet, and Horizon's story began its next chapter, not written by the man who froze a $100 million budget, but by the people who finally understood why he did. Night settled softly over San Francisco, the city glowing like scattered embers across the bay. From the rooftop terrace of his penthouse, Darius Cole watched the skyline shimmer. The world below was still talking about him, the man who froze a $100 million budget and melted a century of silence, but tonight, he wanted none of it. Rachel stepped onto the terrace, a faint smile beneath the silver light. "It is official," she said. "The Human Equity Program is live." Mia Lang gave her first address. "The press is calling it the Cole Standard." He chuckled quietly. "Then let them learn the lesson, it was never about me." "No." Rachel leaned on the railing beside him. "You could take credit, Darius. You changed everything." He looked at her, calm but resolute. "Credit fades. Impact does not." They stood for a long moment, the wind brushing past, carrying the low hum of a distant plane. "She will do well," Rachel said softly. "She already has," he replied. "She turned conscience into policy. That is harder than any speech." Rachel hesitated. "So what now? You finally rest?" He smiled faintly. "Maybe I go home. Sit on my mother's porch. Let the world breathe without my shadow on it." She laughed. "You doing nothing? Impossible." He smiled again. "Even storms rest once they have cleaned the sky." The city below shimmered like a heartbeat. Darius glanced upward, watching a plane trace a silver line across the night. "You know," Rachel said, "for someone who conquered the sky, you look most at peace when you are grounded." He nodded slowly. "Because I finally learned flight was never about altitude, it was about access." A pause lingered between them, full and quiet. "Good night, Darius," Rachel said gently. He smiled. "Good night, Rachel. Thank you for staying through the turbulence." When she left, Darius remained alone with the wind and the hum of distant engines. He thought of the past week, the humiliation, the silence, the justice, all converging into one truth. Real power does not roar. It endures. And as another plane rose into the night, its lights glinting like hope reborn, Darius Cole whispered to the dark, "That is the sound of dignity finally learning how to fly."